Okay. Phones off. We're doing all together. Phones off. I don't want to see any phones around. Okay, we don't have the mobile microphone today. Somebody has stolen it. So I will be using this one, but I will still try to move with this microphone. It will be a little bit strange, but I'll try to do it. Now, do you have any questions on what we did last week? I will go over partly of certain material that we worked in the sections, but I would like to learn whether if you have any questions or not at this point. Okay. Now, do you all have a copy of the handout today? No. Okay. Şunu arkaya doğru gönderirseniz şöyle. Okay. Now, what we did last week was for some of you confusing because you had a number of questions related to different parts of the course, and that's understandable. Of course, one thing that you should remind yourself all the time in this course, there is one space here that you can see. Okay, and one thing that you should remind yourself in this course is simply you should realize that certain things, even if I describe you in the beginning, is not going to be very clear unless we start doing something. And hopefully this week is going to be a very good indication of that. Now, what I will do this week is simply go over a few examples that I picked up. All the examples are actually very simple examples in the sense that you are not going to have any problems with respect to understanding examples. But of course, I'm going to use these as examples throughout the semester. So I want you to be very concentrated on today's lecture. And then in the sections, we're going to work more on a part of what we have done. But before going further, let me go over last week's work again and simply try to convey the message of what I really wanted in the quiz. I gave you the question, I gave you everything, but of course there was some vagueness, but I was expecting you to take the definition of the word process and utilize it in a certain way to answer that question. So, first of all, you have to understand that the process that we are going to deal as industrial engineers will be an engineered process. It's not going to be a natural process. It's not going to be a process which is casual or happens only one time. So usually, we're going to deal with a problem where we are going to have a series of actions, changes, functions, some steps are going to be required, and so on. Now, I'll give you a simple example of your university entrance exam, university selection problem. It's a selection problem, actually. What do you have is, in the beginning, you have a large number of alternatives. If I call an alternative as a university, department, or city, these all create different alternatives. So you have a group of alternatives. Given these alternatives, an engineering process will simply find out the ones that are going to be utilized for a particular motive that you want to come up with at the end. Now, the motive in particular for industrial engineering in general is going to be called as an economic motive. Economic does not necessarily mean monetary, but of course it means monetary in the first place, but there are other things as well. For example, your university department selection problem actually has an economic motive in general. Now, regardless of your purpose of coming to the university, okay, you may come to a university to enjoy yourself, to build up a future for yourself, and so on. it all has a so-called economic interpretation. So there is a certain motive behind your selection. So in that respect, university selection problem, selecting the department problem, is actually a very reasonable problem which can be described as a process. It's an engineered process, actually. Now, of course, each of us, when we are solving our problem, we are not going to use hardcore engineering approach to do that, whereas you can actually do that if you want. Now, later on in the semester, we're going to solve an example related to this, okay, when we are dealing with some kind of an approach that is used in industrial engineering, okay? But this is an engineering approach. So what makes it an engineered process? We have a series of actions, changes, function steps. Of course, this means that you have alternatives when you are making your action. You have to select among one of those, one at a time. Or you may look at from the beginning and select everything from scratch. And there is a particular economic motive behind it. Economic, 98% of the time is monetary, but 2% of the time we might call certain things as benefits, welfare, so on and so forth. For example, if you are building a third airport in Istanbul, you only not look at the economic motive, but you look at other issues, which is basically increasing the welfare of the environment, welfare of the country, so on and so forth, or environment and so on and so forth, which are not easily quantifiable, but it has definitely an economic motive. You want to do it because you want to grow as a country, and so on and so forth. Now, an engineered process may be repetitive, which means that you might be doing the same thing over and over again. Think about the process to manufacture an automobile. Very simple, am I right? We are repeating the same process over and over again because we don't have only one automobile, we have a number of automobiles. On the other hand, the department selection problem or university selection problem might be considered as repetitive if you are, let's say, if you are giving advice to students, because it's the same procedure, okay? It's the same procedure that you ask for students to follow. But if you are doing it yourself, it's not going to be a repetitive process for yourself. Maybe for some of you, it will be a repetitive process, okay? If you enter a department or a university 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times, whatever. But usually, in an engineered process, we are expecting this process to be repetitive, okay? This is the key to follow. Now, it can be part of a larger process. So, as I said, engineers are very happy to divide the problem into smaller parts and describe the smaller part and try to resolve the smaller part first. If you solve, let's say, 3, 4 smaller problems, these all can be part of the larger process. We're going to see as an example today. So when I say process, there is no unique definition of process. As engineers, we have to define the range that we are going to deal with. We call it the problem environment. We usually define our problem environment. We say that we are not going to deal with this part, but this is the problem that we will be interested, or the client or the owner of the problem may ask for a particular problem to be resolved. So it can be part of another process which we might need to understand what's going on in general, but then focus on our own problem, on our own process. Now, another thing is we are dealing with structured and well-defined issues in processes. Now, mental processes in general, if you just let it go, it's not necessarily structured, okay? But one of the purposes of this course is to make sure that you can structure certain mental processes so that you will be a good engineer in the sense that you will be able to figure out which part I should deal, which part you have to be more systematic and analytic. This is the definition of being analytic. Mathematics is only a part of analytics. Certain other things are required to be more analytic, so on and so forth. Now, Another thing which is very important is that you have to have a measurable outcome, so that you are going to make your selection around that measurable outcome. You have to be able to measure certain things. For example, if those of you who entered the university twice may have used different ways of preparing themselves or different ways of selecting the departments that they want to enter in both of those cases. Now, what is the measurable outcome? In one case, your decision may take a longer period. For example, time might be one aspect. Or in the other, it might be something else. But the idea is that you have a measurable outcome that you will be able to measure your efforts towards this process, whether it is good or not or bad. So there should be a more concrete definition of good, bad, and so on. Now, this is important, and we're going to talk a lot about this, because this is something which is usually missing in cultures. I'm talking about cultures now, not necessarily university cultures, but cultural environments that you are going to see. We have, for example, in the Turkish culture, we have a tendency of less valuing some measurable outcomes, very concrete measurable outcomes. We usually like to discuss certain things on very vague terms. Whereas in an engineering approach, you shouldn't be doing that. So if I transform this idea to the answers that you gave, for example, for quiz number 1, I can see that some of you had written certain things like this. I really liked the industrial engineering a lot, so that was my only motivation, so I selected industrial engineering. Now, this doesn't describe anything. This doesn't convey any information. It conveys, of course, your sentimentality towards industrial engineering, but we don't understand how that sentimentality is created, because we all know that you are not born with that sentimentality. It is something which comes later on. Okay? So these type of things are usually not very measurable, but we are going to convert certain things to more measurable spaces. And you're going to see how we're going to do that, or we will try to do that. Okay, questions? Okay, now let's look at quiz 1. What was my expectation? Now, I wanted you to realize the meaning of the word process from the definitions. Of course, this requires some concentration, and you have to understand why you are concentrating and so on and so forth. But I think this is a good example because it's something that you worked for a long time. Before coming to this university, you worked for a long time. Now, there were many different answers. We still didn't finish grading. It will be finished probably on Friday. But we just looked at me and my assistants, we just looked at several different answers. Now, there are many different possibilities, and we're going to look and value those possibilities. Now, in my opinion, there can be two answers in an engineering sense to this question. Two types of approaches can be used to answer this question, two distinct ways. Of course, you can have a combination of that, and most of you have had, if I just took a sample and looked at it, most of you had a combination of those. Okay, now what are these two different distinct ways? Now, this is what I'm saying. I am answering how. How did you select industrial engineering department? How did you select? Okay, so to answer this question, what you do is you list probably chronologically, okay, the material that you read, the people that you talked, the institutions that you visited, the presentations that you attended, the discussion sessions that you had with your friends, the discussion sessions that you had with your family, the sessions that you had with your family's very good relatives, like uzak amcaoğlu, like uncle's son or the cousin or whoever, or the neighbor. Okay, neighbors are very important as well. They would start saying that I have an industrial engineer that I know, and so on. And so you will say, oh, wow, what's going on? Okay, so this is actually one way of describing the process. In other words, what you are describing is, you are describing the nodes Node is actually something that we're going to work on more. But think about this as a network. You know telephones and nodes. Each node might be a telephone, or each node might be one of the receivers that we have all around. So what you do is you decide on the sequence of nodes that you are going to visit. Each time you visit, you're going to get some information. And once either the due date comes, or once you are really fed up, okay, you make your decision. Okay? Now, this doesn't explain why you made that decision. That's the next step. But at least what it describes is, it describes what you did in order to be able to make the decision. Okay? So this is one way of describing it. So this is a physical interpretation of the word process. You describe what you have done step by step. Okay? For example, if we can create an immediate analogy to this, auto manufacturing. In auto manufacturing, there are certain steps of operations where you start with the body. You first manufacture the body, and then you manufacture some other parts, and then you assemble, bring them together, and so on. But at the end, you obtain the automobile. The product is there. So your steps, on the other hand, are the material that you read, the people that you visited. Now, these steps are going to be very similar if I take 5, 10, 6 people in this classroom. The type of people that you visited or the type of resources that you used might be different, but physically, everybody in this classroom did something like this. So there are a large number of nodes that you can visit in the outside world. You select the ones that you think are more important or you think that you can reach, and you simply visit those in a certain order. Okay, that order is not necessarily arbitrary, but then at the end you come up and give the decision. Your next friend has visited different types of nodes, but at the end came to the terminal node which says decision. Okay? So basically, in an abstract manner, you can see that what you have done physically is more or less similar. Of course, inherently, why you came up with industrial engineering is going to be different from one person to the other. But this is something that you can generalize. Am I right? Any questions on this? Now, this is one way of explaining the process. So actually, if you are a graduate of this department, I can see that to become an advisor for high school students, okay, I think there are a large number of advisors around. I know that as well. But I think it's a very good business. Am I right? Because you have like millions of people entering the university. They usually don't know what they are going to do. Of course, in high schools, you have some professionals who are going to help you with respect to what to do and how to do and so on. But in general, I think this is a very good market. And I know that there are a lot of people making a lot of money in this market. Okay? But eventually, what it is simply you have possible nodes, alternatives. Given that alternatives, you select your own set. And then you visit each set, read something, see somebody, talk to somebody, and so on. And accumulate information all the time and end up with a decision. Okay. Any questions on this? How many of you did describe your process of selecting university this way? Okay. Okay, that's, we're going to see the exact numbers, actually. I will combine the exact numbers. Okay. Now, the second one is to answer why. In other words, you can approach the same problem. Questions? Okay. You can approach the same problem, and this time, instead of describing on the material that you read, the people that you have seen, and so on and so forth, what you can do is you can think about this in another way. So you can describe the thought process that you undertook for the selection. What do I mean by that? In other words, some of you may sit down, I think in maybe second year of high school or third year of high school, I don't know. You sit down and you list what you want to do. So you have a list of things that you want to do in life, which are related to your university selection or department selection. And there might be certain things that you don't want to do. Okay? Of course, writing it there requires that you go through the other process. In other words, you have to learn and read and so on here as well. But this is not how we are going to write our process. So we are going to write our process in terms of the mental decisions that we gave in between certain steps. Okay, this is a little bit more abstract and difficult to understand than the previous one. Okay, so for example, what you can do is you can make one list, update the list, make a list of that things that you don't want, and then update that list as well. And then you have a list that you want, a list that you don't want. Hopefully, as time elapses, what you want is you want the list that contains what you want to be very small, and the list that contains what you don't want to be much larger. And the total is probably all the alternatives that you have. Okay? And what you do is you basically use this in coming up the decision. For example, you eliminate dislikes, you eliminate some other things, other issues that you have into consideration. We're going to see a good example later on university selection. So we're going to find out what are the factors that may affect our departmental selection, university selection, so on and so forth, in an abstract manner. Now, in this case, the interpretation of process gives more importance to the decision sequences leading to your final decision. In other words, what you do is you have a final decision there, but before coming to that point, you give a number of smaller decisions. Dislikes, likes, and then you change it. You learn maybe something more, and then you change it again. You specify it more. For example, you started with the word engineering, but then you discarded industrial engineering, electrical engineering immediately because you don't want to have those, so on and so forth. So there is a sequence of decisions that you actually carry out to come up to the end. Now, this is actually a very important part of industrial engineering because this is the way that we look at things, and this is the way that we improve things. Because the way that we look at the problems are such that we are going to change the way that the final decision is going to be made, and at the same time, the decisions that you give in between will be different. So this is the way that most of the engineering fields will look. So following a sequence of mental activities, if I generalize this approach can be summarized as you create alternatives. Okay? Now, in the university entrance exam case, the alternatives are limited with the YÖK's booklet. Okay, or ÖSYM's booklet. There is a booklet that you can read. Of course, you can also study abroad. It means that you have 25 different booklets for different countries. But you have some alternatives. You might need to create some alternatives because it might not be that obvious. The alternatives might not be that obvious. You take a number of actions to narrow your list. When the list is very narrow, maybe you use a methodology to come up with your final decision. Now, we're going to see a methodology of that sort, actually. Okay? Any questions on this? Now, how many of you did it this way? Okay. Now, how many of you did the combination of those two? Okay. Now, how many of you didn't do any of these? Okay. Yeah, well, I think the numbers are very similar to what we have observed in the sample. Okay, any questions on this? Okay. This is another thing that you have to learn. Okay? So this is the schedule for this week. So tomorrow we're going to have, in the sections, we're going to have 2 hours of each section. So you're not going to be divided into 2. Okay? And this is next week. Okay, you have it in front of you and at the web. You're going to have it at the web as well. Questions? Okay, hopefully I don't have any mistakes this time. Okay. Now, what did we learn last time in the discussion that we had in the sections? Now, first of all, I learned some of your names. Of course, I don't remember any one of those. Okay? Of course, I mean, how can I remember? Look at that, 200 people. All look very similar to me. You are all, most of you are from Turkey, I suppose. Am I right? You look very similar. Okay. Well, I'm joking. Okay. This is supposed to be a joke. Okay. Now, this is actually number 1 purpose. Number 2 purpose is basically to understand or to discuss certain things that we discuss in the classroom and to discuss it in more detail. Now, most of the groups were very active. Some of the groups were lousy. I mean, I have to tell it in the correct, using the correct word. They were tired and so on, but I expect you to be more active in these sections because that's the purpose. Now, there are a number of issues raised, so I listed those issues from more operational ones to more structured and rigorous and difficult ones. Okay? The first one is operationally. A number of you have asked about the readings. So as you can see, what we have is for every week, we either have some videos to watch, clips to watch, or something to read, or maybe sometimes both of them. So what I will do is I will send you ahead of time those, indicating that those are placed at the web. Or if it is easy to send without the PDF, like I did last week, I will send it to your address. Now, at some point in time, you may say that I didn't receive any mail this week. Please check the website. It's your duty to check the website because that will be available at the website. Okay? Sometimes there might be a mistake with respect to sending emails and so on and so forth, but it will always be available at the website. Okay? Now, I will try to do it not only 3 days in advance, but I will try to put some material in more advanced in the coming weeks. Okay? Now, the second issue, attendance. Okay, a number of questions came with respect to, do we have any attendance? Are you collecting any attendance in this course? The answer is no. I am not collecting any attendance in this course, but I have pub quizzes that you will never know when we are going to do it. Some sections may have it in certain weeks. Some sections may have it in different weeks. So this is actually the pressure that I am putting on you rather than collecting attendance. And it is your selection whether to come or not because the percentages are there. Okay? So you're not going to lose any right if you don't show up and so on. It doesn't matter. Okay? Any questions on this? I think these are probably satisfied. I tried to answer them in the respective groups as well. Okay. Teaching, learning style are very important to understand the logic of this course. We are meeting in this large auditorium under very heavy physical conditions. People started to sweat. I am doing this funny thing without the microphone. But still, I think we have a benefit of meeting here. Okay? I feel that, well, a large percentage of you is feeling the same way. Of course, for the remaining percentage of you, we have the sections. Now, if you are unhappy in this classroom, I expect you to be more active in the other part. Now, my aim is to get the benefit of both worlds. If we can do that, we're going to learn a lot in this course. Okay? So this was another discussion. Any questions on this? Another discussion was on university notion. What is the difference between university and high school? Because most of my actions are giving you the responsibility, like making you sign certain things and so on before the exam. It means that you're taking the responsibility rather than me following you. Okay? Now, this is important. I feel pedagogically it is important. Moreover, it is important with respect to your own maturation. You are already mature, almost, except I think 3 people in this classroom, we are all above 18. Okay, so including myself. Okay, so which is very good. So it means that you are all mature, and I am, after those 17 ones, I took note. So I will feel myself responsible on their whereabouts, where are they going and how they are doing and so on. No, I won't do that, of course. But this is actually university, and you shouldn't be expecting spoon feeding at the university. Do you all know the word meaning of spoon feeding? Yes. Anybody who doesn't know spoon feeding? Okay, spoon feeding is what your parents or the ones who love you does all the time. They feed you all the time, am I right? Say that, oh, you are working, oh, so let me prepare these for you, and so on. This is spoon feeding. Spoon feeding in education is simply saying that, learn this, you're gonna pass. These are the questions that you are going to have, and so on. Whereas I don't know the questions that I am going to ask you until I prepare the exam, and I will never know that. And what I do is I try to make sure that you have enough motivation to learn the material. It's not my objective to make you learn things. My role and objective is to be able to be here and to be able to convey you some information that hopefully you're gonna use. That's my role here. Okay, I'm not like your primary school teacher who expects everybody to learn how to read because she or he thinks that she or he is going to be judged according to the number of people who can read in 2 months. Okay? I'm not like that. And most of the university professors are not going to be like this. Okay? So spoon feeding is something that you should forget. You are responsible for your own actions, and you have to take that responsibility. Of course, there are some benefits of this as well. You are going to make your own decisions with respect to certain things. And if you see that they are successful and so on, you're going to have more confidence in your own actions. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay, the last one, course objective. I had in a number of groups, what is the purpose of the course objective? What is the purpose of this course? Why don't we learn a mathematical tool so that we can easily understand and solve certain problems, and that will make our life easy, rather than you are making us work in certain things that we don't understand why we are working for. So wait for a little while. I think we're going to discuss this in this week's sessions as well, when we are discussing a specific problem. Okay? So I answered those in those sections, but I think we will continuously do the same thing probably. But I can assure you that at the end of the semester, when somebody asks you, what does an industrial engineer do? Okay? Okay, you will say that, well, we do very good things. Okay, like you explain your own process. We are the best. And no, I think you will be able to answer very clearly. Of course, the answer may not be in one sentence, and you shouldn't expect that. But believe me, any engineer is not capable of describing what they do in one sentence. They think that they can explain, but they cannot. Okay? Because there are various different tasks that an engineer would take, and it takes time to learn those. Okay, but at least conceptually, we will understand what IEs are doing at the end of the semester. Questions? Okay. Now, now what I have next in the next group of slides, well, we're going to watch certain videos now, clips. These are the things that I really like, and because they are very simple. Now, the first one is actually an advertisement of a consulting company who does good things about industrial engineering. I don't know about the consulting company. I have only seen their videos. So it is the clip that they prepared to sell a certain 30-minute video. Okay? It's called Toast Kaizen. Okay? Now, you know toast. Toast is bread actually with some butter or margarine. And you toast the bread first, so bread is warm, and then you put some margarine at the top. It's not like the toast that we have, okay? So that's the toast. Okay, and the next word is kaizen. Okay, so let me write that word on the board. Now, kaizen is a Japanese word, and actually you can, in short, it's called improvement, okay? But in certain detail, let me just check. I don't know Japanese, so I need to check that. Okay, the first part, kai, is change actually. And zen, we might know this word zen actually. It's a familiar word. It's for better. Okay, so change for better is the direct translation of the word kaizen. But we can call it as improvement. Okay? Anybody who knows Japanese? There are no Japanese high schools in Turkey, so I cannot spot them. Okay, so this is actually something that we're going to watch starting now. I will stop the clip, and then we will see the remarks. And make some remarks. Okay.
There was a switch in each of your employees' heads, and by turning that switch to the on position, you could get them to notice and eliminate the problems in their daily work process that are holding your business back and costing you and your customers time, money, and other resources. Would you flip that switch? Taiichi Ono and Shigeo Shingo at the Toyota Production Works believed that just such a switch existed in all of us. Now, the post-Kaizen video from the Greater Boston Manufacturing Partnership uses principles developed by Mr. Ono and Mr. Shingo to create a fun and easy way to flip that switch to the on position, to get you and your employees to begin to notice and eliminate waste in a seamless, non-disruptive, day-to-day manner, using many tiny changes for the better to create a groundswell of dramatic improvement, efficiency, and effectiveness. The Toast Kaizen video was conceived and created by Shingo Prize winner Bruce Ham.
Okay. I think I will talk like this, so no problem. Yeah. I think it is important. It's important that you understand. Now, this is an advertisement, okay? So it's not going to describe anything which is deep, but there are a large number of words that you need to record and understand. We don't know the meaning in engineering of those words, like productivity and so on. They are very good looking and nice words, but that's something that you should concentrate. You have to understand those words at some point in time if you are going to use it. Okay? Now, number two, this is a video clip which is trying to sell a longer video. So we're going to now decrease ourselves, or we're going to now look at a very simple example. So don't be deceived by the simpleness of that example. Try to observe everything very carefully.
President of the Greater Boston Manufacturing Partnership and a lean practitioner and educator for 18 years.
The video that you're about to see has been created to demonstrate some of the basic principles of the Toyota production system, or as we call it today, lean thinking, lean manufacturing, or lean administrative.
Bruce begins the video with an overview of lean principles, then takes the principles out of the workplace and into a process that's familiar to all of us, namely the process of making toast. And that might seem a little strange, but think about it. Making toast is about as familiar and as easy a process as you can get, yet that very familiarity often blinds us to several inefficiencies in the process itself. By taking an objective look at such a simple and everyday task with the lean principles in mind, you and your employees can begin to develop a new way of seeing, that can lead to vast changes for the better in your business.
It is a simple process, but it does involve a machine, tools, conveyance equipment, customer. In this case, it's my wife is the customer, and it involves a person who is doing the work, and that would be me.
Bruce performs the simple task of making toast, then challenges the viewer to consider and identify each of the 7 wastes inherent in the process, and to suggest ways to eliminate them. He uses the production of toast as a jumping-off point for defining each of the 7 wastes in a way that gets us to notice things we may never think about in our own day-to-day activity.
You saw me walk back and forth, perhaps 4 times. You say, well, did you get a little nervous, Nancy, watching me wait for that toast? And the worst waste of all, we call overproduction.
Next, Bruce makes toast again, but this time with a few small changes that result in a dramatic savings in both time and frustration. Then Bruce follows up with an in-depth explanation of those changes and of how he eliminated each of the 7 wastes from the process.
The work you need to do is done on a machine, which is far away from you. And we put the butter right at the point of use as well. No more search. The first video, I waited a long time to start the toaster. In the second video, I started the toaster as soon as I knew what the customer wanted. And very importantly, I knew what the customer wanted. And I found a way to make good productive use of my time that was balanced against the machine time. Made it a good day for me and for the customer. This is what continuous improvement is all about.
Once Bruce has defined each of the 7 wastes and has demonstrated how they can be identified and removed from any process through simple observation and change, he concludes the video with a simple challenge.
Yeah, toast is simple to make. Go take a look at another process. Go take a look at your job. But this time, watch with an eye for improvement. And see how many of these wastes you can identify and remove.
And that's Toast Kaizen, a simple and effective 30-minute video that is enjoyable to watch and that teaches lean principles in a way that sinks straight in, just like flipping a switch. It's like a one-on-one session with one of the top lean practitioners in the field. Once you and your employees watch the video, you're likely to discover that it's both fun and easy to look at a process with an eye for improvement. And you'll enjoy the quick and dramatic benefits that come as a direct result of practicing lean thinking. To order.
Okay, I think if you want, of course, you can order. Now, I think there are a number of things to talk about this, but let me remind you of certain words. The word lean means that you don't have any fat. So it is basically muscles and bone, if we're talking about a lean animal. Okay, there is no fat. So every time that you look at anything that you do, what you try to eliminate is certain actions that is not going to result in anything. Those are the analogy of that is fat in the body. Of course, there is a certain limit of fat which is used by the body, but we're talking about the fat which comes later on. So the word lean comes from that. Now, there are a number of things that are mentioned there, but I think anyone who is not familiar with what is the guy doing, like toast, putting butter on it and so on, anybody who is not familiar with that? It's more or less understandable. So what the guy does is the guy actually moves around in the kitchen. So talks about very simple things. If you are going to pick up margarine from the refrigerator, let that margarine be on a location which you can reach. And if you are going to wait, but at the same time and just look at it, instead of that you can go and wash the dishes. Or if you are going to use the knife or the equipment, why don't you operate closer to that equipment and to knife so that you are not going to walk back and forth? These are very simple, very intuitive ideas. Now, classical industrial engineering is based on these type of observations, where you are, by using these type of simple observations, you can improve whatever you are doing in life. Of course, this is a very simple example, and what happens if the guy loses another minute doesn't matter. But if you're talking about an automobile manufacturer which manufactures 100,000 automobiles per month, And if you save 5 minutes per automobile, it's going to change the way that you look at the company. Or if you are a service operator answering certain calls, if you can make your work faster, people are going to wait less on their phones asking for some information. So you can see that here, the measure that we're talking about in this example is what? The time, the measurement that we are using here is time. Time is very important, the total time that it takes to finish a certain job. So the criterion, the performance, is measured with respect to time. Now, we're going to see other videos, but I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this after the break. And I am expecting you to have some questions. And then we're going to watch more. See you in 10 minutes.